The seat is red hot and time is running out for Sonny Dykes. We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, also on your favorite podcast platform. It's a bye week, but we're still putting out daily content here. So we'll have 5 shows this week. No game on Saturday. TCU will prepare for Utah in a couple of weeks. And I'm not going to talk a lot about the Houston game today, not because I'm avoiding negativity or don't want to address it, but I rewatched it on Saturday night. And honestly, there's just not a lot to glean from it. I mean, they played horribly. It was a total team effort. All 3 phases, they were bad. And the main thing that I took from it and that I talked about on Saturday, which if you want to get more into the nuts and bolts of that game and kind of how it played out, you can listen to the post-game show. But the overarching theme, the team just wasn't ready to play. And it makes no sense. I mean, it was a big game. You had a chance to go 4-2, get that time off before the Utah game, maybe figure some things out. Houston looked hapless coming into it, and you got dominated. I mean, it ended up being an 11-point ball game. TCU never led. They were within 1 score a couple of times, but that was it. Houston from start to finish did exactly what they wanted to do, and the only change they really made personnel-wise was Zion Chris at quarterback in place of Donovan Smith, and he had a nice game. But we're at the point with the TCU defense where I don't know if there's an offense that they can slow down. I mean, they did a nice job against Kansas the week before at times. By and large, though, they've struggled against just about everybody. Had some good moments against Stanford. Obviously took care of business against Long Island, but that's where we're at. And not being ready to play, not being prepared to play. I mean, we can talk about coordinators, position coaches. The players obviously share some responsibility in this too. You have to be self-motivated to a certain extent. You have to have leadership on the team. But we're at the point now where all the fingers are starting to point at the head coach. I mean, Sonny Dykes has to figure this out. And watching his post-game press conference on Friday night was honestly kind of sad. The end of the Gary era, GP was, because he had been so good and so dominant for a long time, he was still confident that he could figure it out. And honestly was kind of defiant about like, hey, I know what to do. It's just about everybody else buying in and doing it. Ultimately, he couldn't get that done. And I think the new wave of college football, he didn't really adapt to it well, and that was his undoing, along with being really loyal to some people on that staff that he probably should have let go in the past. But that's what ended it. But his demeanor in press conferences was very different than what we see from Sonny Dykes. When I watched his presser on Saturday morning, to me, he just seemed like a guy that was in over his head. And I'm sure like he woke up the next day and probably, well, I would hope he bounced back and had some confidence about himself. But he just doesn't have the answers. He's continually surprised by the fact that he thinks they're practicing well. He thinks they're understanding what they're doing. But for whatever reason, it's not translating to the field. And that's an issue, right? Either you're not evaluating your team. Sorry if I got muted there for a second. Either you're not evaluating your team's performance on a week-to-week basis well, so practice is happening and things are going poorly and you're just not noticing it, or something's not happening between practice and the game itself and you can't figure out what that is. Either way, it's not a good look and it's not good for the football team. So I don't really know where you go from here. You've got some time before you play Utah. I don't think any changes are going to happen in the next few weeks. Take a road trip to Salt Lake, then you get Tech. After that at home, and I would assume that that'll be 8 games into the season. Maybe there's some assessment made there. I'm still skeptical that they would make a move in season, but the flip side of that is the way that college football works now with the early signing period, you basically had your recruiting class locked up already. They might add a few more commits, and as always, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 guys that decommit. but you've got your class together. So I'm not like, ultimately you have to make the decision if things are going bad, but you need to make it in some ways before the season's over so that you can give whoever the next coach is, the next staff is, time to try to recruit the guys that are currently committed, keep the class together somewhat, and then rally the best way that they can in the few weeks they'll have between the season ending and early signing day to get the job done. But one way that I measure just how bad things are with TCU, because TCU is a school where if they're good, people will notice. And if they're bad or like mediocre, oftentimes they'll kind of fly under the radar. There's not going to be like a college game day segment about what's wrong with the Frogs most of the time. So when the national media starts to notice that things are bad, then that tells me, okay, it's starting to get really bad. Because usually, like, even if TCU is struggling, you're not going to see a ton of articles from The Athletic or whatever national publication that you want to plug in there. You know, towards the end of the Gary era, I remember that Kansas State game that they lost, I think it was like 31-12, but it was never close. Last game that he coached, I saw on Twitter like multiple national writers saying, what the heck is going on with TCU? And that was the first time that it was like, oh, okay, this is getting real. I mean, part of it was that was a Friday night game on ESPN. So it was on a national stage. If that was a Saturday afternoon ESPN Plus special with everything crazy that happened Saturday with Vandy beating Alabama and all the upsets, it would have made some waves, but it wouldn't have nearly gotten the attention that it did being on national TV on Friday night. So I saw Sam Kahn wrote an article that said TCU's post-national title game tailspin hit the new low. What has happened to the Horned Frogs? Halfway into the 2024 season, nothing is going right. He goes over everything that's happened this year. The loss to UCF, the loss to SMU, now a loss to Houston. Since that loss in the national title game, the Frogs are 8-10 overall. And 2 of those wins are against FCS opponents. So against FBS opponents, they are 6-8. The only team they have beaten with a winning record over the past year and a half is SMU. Really, the only upset they pulled off in the last year and a half was BYU. I think it was Richard Berry that said this on the postgame show in the comments. Even at the end of the Gary Patterson era, those teams were usually known for pulling off an upset or two. Even when they were struggling, they were tough, they were physical, they could stay in games for the most part, and they would jump up and beat somebody unexpectedly from time to time. Right now, we're not seeing that. I mean, we're seeing a team that can't seem to pull off unexpected wins. They have inexplicable losses. And, yeah, it's not a great situation. So 6-8 against FBS opponents, 8-10 overall. He talked about the defense and got into some numbers about how bad they've been lately. They're allowing 32 points a game since the start of 2023 to FBS opponents, which ranks 111th nationally. 43% third down conversion rate allowed to FBS opponents, which is 112th. 407 yards per game, which is 92nd nationally. They pressured opposing quarterbacks 27% of the time in the last 16 games, and that ranks 110th. So the defense has been rough. They are turning the ball over and not creating turnovers, which is a big problem as well. And my friend Matt Jennings wrote an article today on Medium, and we'll have him on the show tomorrow. TCU is aimless, and Sonny Dykes is answerless. And I won't drop too many quotes from that yet because I want to get into it with him on tomorrow's show. But it's just about how, hey, he doesn't seem to have the answers. Things are going poorly. He's made some risky hires in the coaching staff. None of it's working. So that's where we're at. I also saw Steven Johnson from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He had an article about basically how much does a playoff win, how much time does a playoff win buy you? Like at this point, how much longer are they going to let him keep coaching this team, trying to develop it if the results aren't there? So we're in a tough spot for this team. Like it's really difficult to even talk about the short term when it feels like the long-term picture is so muddled. And I do want to be clear. I know everybody's piling on right now. I don't think this guy is just some total bumbling coach. Like, he did win a lot of games in 2022. It was an outlier given his resume, but he found a way to get that team motivated. But the results are the results. It's not working right now. And, I mean, it's just week to week. It's a Jekyll and Hyde type of thing that's totally unpredictable. They went on the road to Arrowhead. Kansas is bad. They lost to Arizona State this weekend. They've got one win on the year. KU's a bad football team. I get it. But so is Houston. And you went on the road and you found a way to win that ball game against KU, and then you come home and you just put forth a horrible effort against a really bad Houston team. And so looking at the schedule now, I mean, I think there will be some more opportunities to win games, but I can't in good faith pick them to beat anybody right now because I don't know which TCU team is going to show up. And so it's really hard to get a read on what they're going to do and how they're going to move forward. When we come back, I do want to get into, as a fan, what would you rather see for the rest of the season? Because there's a couple different ways this could go, and it's going to have a huge effect on how Jeremiah Donati evaluates Sonny Dykes and his coaching staff. So we'll get into that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. If you need tickets for that next great event, make sure you check out the Gametime app. Gametime makes it really easy and simple for you to buy tickets on the secondary market. And with the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, you can get $20 off your first purchase. Again, that promo code is LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions, as always, do apply. One thing I love about the Gametime app, they give you a picture of what your view is going to be from your seat when you sit down. So you know up front, okay, when I get here, this is what I'm going to be looking at. This is the view that I get. Also, there's no hidden fees. There's some fees, but they tell you exactly what they are up front so that you know when you go to checkout, okay, this is what I'm going to be paying. They have last-minute deals, flash sales. So if you can't get it involved or if you don't get involved early in the process, you can still make things happen on the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app today, Locked On College, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions, as always, do apply. Gametime is the place to go for tickets. So with where this team is at right now, and I mean, I don't say these things lightly. I understand these are people. I think Sonny Dykes is a good dude. He seems very nice. I want him to figure it out. I still think there's a very small chance that some things improve throughout the rest of the season. But right now, I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to. And so I wonder where you're at as a fan. And I'd love to hear from you in the YouTube comments or on Twitter at SimcockSteven. At this point, it doesn't look like there's a lot of winnable games on the schedule. I would imagine on a Monday after losing to Houston at home, you're like, we're probably not going to win another game. But I do feel like there's going to be some opportunities, Oklahoma State at home, Baylor on the road, maybe Cincinnati on the road, to scratch out a couple more victories. So as someone who supports TCU, I know you want to see them win. That's ultimately the goal. That's why we do this every Saturday. Are you at a place where you would rather see them get to 6-6, get bowl eligibility, have a chance to play in the postseason, turn this thing around somewhat? I don't really think they're going to do much more than that. I mean, if they get to like 7-5, then we're talking about really almost a 180, because that means you're going 4-2 in your last 6. I feel like 6-6 is really the ceiling for this team at this point. Make a bowl game, see what happens. So is that what you want to see? Do you want to see them turn things around a little bit, get to 6-6, go play in a bowl game? Or are you at the place where you're not rooting against them, but you're like, you know what? I think the best thing for this group long-term is play a lot of these young guys, see what you got, and if you end up not making a bowl game and it becomes pretty obvious that a move needs to be made, then maybe that's what needs to happen. So just let me know, because as we sit here today, I'm someone who's always like, if you can make the postseason, go for it, because I think those extra practices are valuable. I feel like it's just valuable to win games and learn how to win. And I know the team's going to be working towards that. But I do believe – I don't really know. I don't have a great feel for what could save the ship at this point as far as this coaching staff staying on board for another year. I was in the camp up until Friday. I was really in the camp that he was going to get another year to show, like, okay, here's what I can do with my guys. You had a lot of returning players coming back next season, along with a talented recruiting class. And that would sort of be the make or break, like, all right, if you're going to do it, here's your chance to go get it done. I don't know now. I mean, I really don't. And I had some people hit me up after the game on Friday, and they were like, we need to see some more of these young players, like Jonathan Backs at edge rusher. He needs to get in there. These young corners that haven't played a whole lot, they need to get in the game. And I'm down for that. I mean, like, I'm okay with throwing them in the fire to a certain extent. I think that was successful in some ways against KU. But I'm not sure if we're at that point yet with the coaching staff. I think we might see a few more weeks of them trying to roll out this current roster they got and see what happens. One thing that was brought up after the game that struck me as just kind of dumbfounding. Josh Hubert, I'm not throwing him under the bus. He had a bad game Friday. I think overall he's had a good season. And I love his leadership and what he brings to the table. But he said that Houston threw some different looks at them that they weren't expecting. And they really sold out to stop the pass. And I noticed that too. I mean, all day long, you know, those RPOs that they've had so much success with, they were right up on the line of scrimmage defending those passes, those quick passes, and really daring TCU to run the ball. And they had success running the ball with Cam Cook at times, but they couldn't stick with it because of the score. And they were behind. They were having to score quickly. But they were able to get pressure and really do what they needed to do with 3 down linemen. So they were dropping 7 or 8 guys back in coverage and really selling out to stop the pass. And that was unexpected, apparently, and TCU just couldn't handle it. And that's a theme this year. Like Sonny said it in that Stanford game. I think he even said it after like Long Island and SMU as well, that the teams they're playing are just doing completely different things than they saw on film. And I just don't understand. Like, to me, that's such basic coaching. I mean, I didn't play football at a high level. I know there are people that listen to the show and watch the show that did. So maybe they can give me some more insight as to what goes on a week-to-week basis. But I remember playing high school football, and, you know, you had your scout team during the week. Coaches watch film. They'd come out with the cards. They'd have, here are the plays that we think this opposing team's going to run. Here are the formations that we think this opposing team is going to come out in. And the scout team would get out there and they'd give you the best look they could. But then when the game would roll around on Thursday or Friday night, you'd get out there and it'd be slightly different. Like, there would be some new wrinkles or some different things with alignment or with scheme that would throw you off a little bit. And you would have to do the best you could, and then you get back together as a unit and you huddle up and you figure out, okay, what adjustments do we need to make, right? Like, what changes do we have to make here to be successful so that later in the game, hopefully they'll get back into more traditional concepts that we were expecting. We'll have a better plan for that. So why is TCU not ready for this? Like, what's going on? Okay, they're throwing unexpected things at you, then adjust. Like, that's the whole job. That's what you're supposed to do as a coach. I mean, Sonny mentioned after the game, he was like, we shouldn't have subbed because what was happening late in that ball game, TCU would sub on offense, and TCU's done this in the past. And then Houston would sub on defense, and they would usually sub in defensive linemen, and those defensive linemen would take their sweet time running onto the field, and that's totally legal. I mean, it's something that's really become a huge part of football in the past few years to slow down the tempo of offenses. Okay, if you're going to sub, then we're going to sub, and we're going to take our time so that we can let our guys catch our breath. We can get a good look at what formation that you're in, and we can have success or more success trying to diagnose what you're going to do. So Kendall Browse was subbing guys in and out a lot, and it was slowing down the offense. Well, you're the head coach. Get on the headset and tell them to stop taking guys out of the game. Tell your OC and your position coach, we can't do that anymore. We got to stop subbing. We have to speed up this drive and try to put this defense on their heels. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know what's going on. But there's something broken there that is really hurting this football team, and they've got to get it fixed. But I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you want for the rest of the season? Do you want to see this team scratch out a few more wins and get to bowl eligibility, or are you at the place where you're like, I think the best thing long-term might be if it's obvious that a change needs to be made? We'll see. We'll see when they play Utah here in a couple weeks. When we come back, we'll wrap things up with some audience reaction. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. LinkedIn Jobs, an important part of any program and any business, is recruiting. You need to find people on your side that can do the job well and that fit the culture of your business. That's why you need to use LinkedIn Jobs. It's the #1 job site in the country. People are looking for work on LinkedIn, and typically they're not looking anywhere else. They're just looking on LinkedIn because that's the place to be. So you can cast a wide net. They have screening questions and other tools that allow you to pare that down so that you're not sifting through all these thousands of resumes, and you can find quality candidates for your job. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free, linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. So a lot of you had feedback after that Houston game, which is great. I mean, I hate losing, but the post-game shows can be kind of entertaining because people are just ready to talk and ready to let everybody know what's going on. Glow says at this point it's time to stop worrying about the dubs and L's this season and start worrying about the long-term impact that football and their low-caliber play is having on TCU's brand in the world of realignment and possible super conferences. TCU can't afford to fall flat on their face during such a transformational time in the CFP world. Fix it or end up in the outside looking in. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's another aspect of this that's troubling is we're in a time now where super conferences are a thing. The Big Ten and SEC are really trying to take over this sport. And TCU has some things working in their favor when it comes to realignment. They're in a great place, geographically. They're in a large TV market, and that still seems to matter. But if you're not good, this is not a place that has a brand that's big enough to make up for that, right? Like Texas is great now. They're the #1 team in the country. But before they got plucked by the SEC, they were struggling, but they're still Texas. They have a great history. They have a large fan base. TCU's not in that place. So they need to get better. Many of you are ready to move on from Sonny Dykes. Jacob Langford said, when does tennis season start? It's a great question. Coming off a national title, it'll be fun to see them. TCU soccer and volleyball had a great weekend, if anybody's curious. Soccer team went and beat Colorado on the road. I believe that score was 6-1. Fantastic effort by them. Volleyball's off to a great start. They're 3-1 in conference play. So maybe you can check out that if you're interested in, other sports at this time of year. Jim Norris said just a complete and massive disaster. It's not like we're playing Alabama. Total embarrassment in front of the whole country. Football is a coach-centric game. Yeah, it is. And, I mean, we're at the place where a lot of the pressure and blame is falling on Sonny Dykes, and that's a big deal. Floyd says it seems like once that targeting penalty happened, it was downhill from there. That was a great hit by Ed Kamara. It was really unfortunate that he got a penalty for targeting because I don't think it was intentional. It was just a good football play. Now, that forced a 4th down, or it would have been 4th down if there was no penalty. I don't know if they get a stop there, but you're right. That was a big momentum shift. And really, I mean, I said I wasn't going to talk about the Houston game, but I do think that first sequence was big because they got to stop on that first drive. And I feel like if they go down the score early, then the game plays out differently. But they failed on 4th and 2. They gave up a touchdown, and then they were behind the 8 ball really from the jump. And for whatever reason, this is a team that can't handle much adversity. Well, I think you guys know the reason based on the things we've talked about today. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. We'll be back tomorrow. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.